So let's get started. I think I'd like to start today with some information from you. I will, of course, be talking a little bit about anxiety, but I'd like to hear from you. What are some things that your kids are most concerned about, or some things that you're most concerned about? So, we know that anxiety is a natural part of life, but when the emotions and concerns related to anxiety become too difficult for a child, they will definitely need your help. And this would be true for teens as well. So let's say a few things about how the brain works and how anxiety functions in the brain and why anxiety and ADHD travel so closely together. So research has shown that in the general population of children and teens up to the age of 17, the anxiety rates are about 7%. This is before COVID, so it could be different now. For kids with ADHD, the anxiety rates are closer to 34%. For adults with ADHD, and the statistics are actually similar in terms of the 7 or whatever percent, 50% of adults with ADHD have anxiety. So anxiety is something that's happening to all of us, to many of us, much of the time. And those are people who have a full diagnosis. That doesn't mean people who have tendencies toward anxiety. So I'm hoping that you can hear me. If you can't hear me, please let me know. So let's talk a little bit about the brain. So the brain, as we know, is a very interesting organ with an organism. And what happens is that there are different parts of the brain. There's the physiological brain in the back, and that's our basically our blood pressure and our heart rate, and keeps us alive. Then there's the middle part of the brain, the emotional brain. It's also called the mammalian brain. And in this part of the brain is where the limbic system lives. And inside the limbic system, which has a lot to do with managing feelings, is two small organs. One's in the left side of the brain, one's on the right, called the amygdala. And these are almond-shaped organs. And what they do is they help, they manage fight, flight, and freeze. So then we have the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking brain. And so what happens is, and this part of our brain is where our executive functioning skills are, and it manages the rest of the brain. And in people with ADHD, there can be a delay of up to 3 years in the connectivity between this part of the brain and the rest of the brain, which is why we say that kids with ADHD mature more slowly, sometimes up to 3 years behind. When we have strong feelings, when people with ADHD have strong feelings, one of the executive functions that's so important has to do with emotional control, emotional regulation. And often that's weaker in people with ADHD. It's also fundamentally linked to working memory, which is something many people with ADHD struggle with. So how does this relate to anxiety? How it relates to anxiety is that because people with ADHD often struggle with emotional regulation. When they have feelings, they're very intense, and what happens is that the amygdala is more likely to sort of come out from the middle part of the brain. I like to think of the brain as like a Tesla. In the back is the engine. That's our physiological brain. In the back seat of the car is is where the emotional brain lives. And in the front seat with that computer, making sure we go to all the right places, is our thinking brain. And in episodes of strong emotion, fight, flight, or freeze, the amygdala comes out from the back seat. It elbows our thinking brain over to the passenger seat, and it starts directing and driving the car that is us. And it's a very erratic kind of driving. And so what we have to do is to get the emotional brain back in line. And we do that with breathing, because we have to control the physiological response. We do that with language, talking to ourselves or being able to talk about what's going on. So, and for people with ADHD, it's a lot harder to manage that process. So let's look at what some of you are saying about some of your concerns. Okay. Thank you, Dawn. Lisa Dawn. Hi, Susan. Hi, Eva. Hi, Jennifer. So anxiety in your teen looks like insomnia. Oh, I know that one. Oh, great, Megan. I'm glad. Kate, my 7-year-old has extreme existential anxiety about death. Well, actually, that's pretty typical for a 7-year-old. A lot of 7-year-olds can be afraid about things like fires and death, and that's part of development, human development. The extreme part, maybe not so much. School and grades is a source of anxiety. Mine is really the difficulty of social anxiety and making friends, despite given opportunities, therapies, etc. My youngest hasn't done social skills classes, and I'm thinking of finding one for him, age 15. I have 2 neurodivergent kids. That's a great idea. What your 15-year-old might also like to do, which I found very helpful for a bunch of my clients who struggle with social anxiety, actually are improvisational acting classes. They're fun. There are all kinds of like theater games, and there's no pressure to perform. And it doesn't feel like you're going to work. Sometimes groups can feel stigmatizing, but improvisational theater can be fun. I have a number of clients who've really thrived. Tanya, my son 9 is worried about time on a daily basis. There are not enough hours in the day for him to do everything he would like to do, and he spends his days worrying about everything. I try to explain to him that spending time worrying about not having time is actually taking time away from the things he would like to do, but it doesn't help. One thing that I think would be helpful for your son Tonya, is actually to sit down and have him to get all his worries out in one 15-minute setting. Okay, you're worried. Let's get all the worries out. All I want you to do for the next 15 minutes is worry. Worry, 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 worry. And I'm going to bet that that's going to be very hard for him to do. Because he'll get some worries out and then he'll change the subject, or he'll do something else and then he'll circle back. And what you want is to try to get him to get them all out. So that way he can see that actually all the time that he's using for worrying, like if he got all his worries out in 15 minutes and a worry came up at another point in the day, he can say, it's not your time right now. Your time is at 3 p.m. or 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. You have 2 special times, and that's when you can come out. So right now, forget about it. Just something to play with. We call that a strategic intervention, something that's different than expected. Dee Dee, my 12-year-old son's anxiety comes across as anger. Dee Dee, this happens a lot for kids, and partially that's because that fight, flight, fear is sort of mixed up. And that anger is also the gatekeeper for all kinds of emotions, particularly for young men and boys. It's okay to be angry. It's less okay in the culture of toxic masculinity to be scared, to be vulnerable, to be sensitive. And so that may be the gatekeeper. And I might want to talk with him about that and say, okay, well, so I see the anger. I hear what you're telling me. I'm curious, what's behind the anger? What's underneath it? Because usually anger is just the gatekeeper. There's something else that it's guarding. Yes, there's always a recording available. Lacey, anxiety in my 9-year-old son looks like shutting down or appearing lazy while in a school setting. He expresses his anxiety with his words at a home setting. Oh, that's good. I'm glad he talks about it. When he is shutting down in school, could his teacher send him on an errand? Could his teacher send him to a place where he feels safe to regroup so that he can come back into the setting? Is there a cozy corner in the classroom? Can he get a drink of water? If he's shutting down, is he aware that he's shutting down? And if he is, could he raise his hand or have some sort of signal with the teacher so that he could, sort of pivot and settle and start again? One of the things that we have to think about is that when we're anxious, anxiety is a physiological response to worried thinking. And so we have to treat the physiology of the anxiety. And the way we're going to do that really is through settling our body down. And for some people, settling their body down can be dancing. For some people, it can be going for a run. For some people and for many people, it's just paying attention to breathing, to slowing yourself down. And the way that we're going to do that is by teaching some breathing tools. And I've talked about these tools before. We can teach alternate nostril breathing, from yoga, where you breathe in and breathe out from the same nostril, and then breathe in and breathe out. You could teach what I call triangle breathing. Breathe in for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, hold for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathe out for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes we might want to ask our kids to smell a beautiful rose, or blow out the candle, or smell a cup of hot chocolate and cool it down. So we want to have some tools that they can access. And if your kids can read, you could write those down. If your kids do better with pictures, you can get some pictures of that. But we want to have them access their breathing, and you learn to use that, because it's always available wherever you are. Basil, I've had anxiety since childhood, school anxiety, not recovered from the school anxiety. I'm sorry to hear that, Basil, and maybe the school anxiety has transformed into some kind of adult anxiety. That happens. Tina, manifest as staying in the room all the time. Hi, Jessica. Now, of course, yes, Patty, you will. So, of course, Jennifer, I want to get back to insomnia in a minute. So, we're living in a very anxious time. We are in an age of anxiety right now, every day. That anxiety has to do with a war in Europe. That anxiety has to do with COVID. That anxiety has to do with, if you live in the United States and in other countries, all kinds of political changes or conservatism that might be threatening certain people's rights, and liberalism that might be threatening other people's sense of self. So there's a lot of turmoil everywhere. And so when we live in this sort of crucible of anxiety, we are not relaxed. We are stressed. And our kids themselves are stressed. Kids are coming out of COVID in school having missed 2 years, 2 crucial years of development, social skills, academic skills, behavioral skills. And so there are higher levels of anxiety across the board. Now, Jennifer, you're asking about anxiety and insomnia. And a lot of times it's hard to fall asleep. A lot of times people tell themselves they can't sleep, and then they don't fall asleep. Sometimes they wake up in the middle of the night. They find it hard to go back to sleep because their mind is going. And so, I think with a teen who struggles with insomnia, I'd like to get a little more information from you on the type of insomnia, and then we can maybe brainstorm some possible solutions. Thank you. Hi, Masha. Hi, Marcia, excuse me. Marcia, our 12-year-old's visible anxiety is focused around peers and not fitting in. She still has daily nightmares. We're not sure what those are about. That's interesting. I wonder if something's happened in her world that has frightened her and made this so much worse. I also wonder if she's witnessed someone who's been excluded or teased and is afraid of that happening to her. I'm kind of curious about what, the content of the nightmares. There's one theory of dreams, where you are all parts of your dream. And sometimes it's helpful to think about that, what part of your dream is manifesting here. And sometimes it's interesting to think about, you as a dreamer, what is happening. And could you go, if you were to go back into that scary dream, how would it resolve? What would you do to resolve it? We call that dreaming the dream forward. And maybe she could draw that, maybe she could talk it, or maybe you could close your eyes and say, okay, let's go back to that scary place. This is during an awake moment, and see what would come next. What's an option? Like, how could we restory what's happening to our heroine? Michelle, how many of these kids have difficulty to control anger? Do regular anger management skills work for this population? Michelle, a lot of kids with ADHD struggle with anger. A lot of adults with ADHD struggle with anger, and that has to do with the flooding that's occurring with emotional dysregulation and that amygdala hijack. Regular management skills can work, of course, but also a kind of needs to come from an understanding that there are some biological limitations that are in play, and how and what we could do with the physiology to make some changes. Okay. Yes, so we often see that anger. D, hi. I find that just validating a child's feeling can help. Oh, yes, I'm going to support you on that one. I don't agree taking things away as punishment, but implementing incentives, looking at TV time, iPads, Xboxes as privileges that can be earned. D, you're speaking to the converted over here. Thank you. I love that. I'm really glad you shared that. Cheryl, my 15-year-old son has social anxiety, or my 15-year-old is social anxiety, not son, daughter. She doesn't want to do anything and still struggles in school. So social anxiety, that can be something that we can come back and talk about because it's very specific and it's different than general anxiety. So general anxiety has to do with, insomnia or worry about grades or not making friends or, death or illness and things like that. And we treat that in one particular way. And social anxiety is different. And I just want to say that social anxiety, social anxiety has to do with a core sense of deficiency. I'm not, okay. I'm not good enough. I don't, I have a limited belief about who I am. General anxiety has to do with a sense of, will things be okay? I don't have control over them, and that's making me anxious. I can't predict what's going to happen. And it doesn't come with a core sense of deficiency the way social anxiety does. It comes from a discomfort with insecurity. I'm uncomfortable because I don't know how things are going to work out. And that's where we have to work with kids, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Jennifer, my son's ADHD and anxiety contribute to procrastination. Oh yes, procrastination is a form of anxiety, particularly for people with ADHD, whether it's perfectionism or avoidance or productive procrastination. Michelle, my second born had insomnia as an elementary student. It's a tough behavior to change. I have insomnia too and ADHD. Yeah. I'm also not the best sleeper in the world. Tammy, my daughter's anxiety also comes out in anger, but she is also afraid of being judged or rejected by peers, which has happened a lot since her diagnosis. And now she has gravitated to a bad group of kids because they accept her. So this happens, unfortunately, more often than I would like to say. So because kids can be so cruel to each other, because kids value some sort of, imaginary sameness that doesn't exist, right? We are neurodiverse as a human population. We all have cognitive strengths and challenges, which is different than being neurodivergent. Neurodiverse is the umbrella. Underneath we have neurotypical and neurodivergent. But that means that as humans, we are neurodiverse, just like there's gender diversity and ethnic diversity, racial diversity, etc. So the fear of being judged is pulling her towards kids who actually already have outward issues, who won't judge her, but they'll accept her as someone who's different. And I think that one of the things that is frustrating I imagine is frustrating for you, is how to get her to make better choices with her friends, particularly because these kids are not helping her, grow and flourish in a way that you would like. Um, I would encourage maybe her to get some counseling if you can do that, because this fear of being judged or rejected may have some roots in a reality. I think people with ADHD and kids with ADHD live with a thousand little paper cuts of complex trauma. And so there just may not be a single incident, but there may be a lot of little things that happen along the way. And since so many, particularly girls with ADHD, also have rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or sensitive, sort of very sensitive or fragile in some ways, she may be masking that with her anger. Wow, there are so many comments. This is great. Dee Dee, when my son was anxious at 12, he was also angry and violent. I looked a lot at trauma-informed parenting practice, and this really helped for him. Yes. So trauma-informed parenting practice means that instead of asking, why is my child acting this way, we're asking the question, what's happened in my child's life that is leading them to behave this way? Cheryl, why does my ADHD kid not sleep well? She goes to bed early, wakes up at least once or twice a night, and sometimes stays up the rest of the night. I give her melatonin. Is this common? Yes, it is common. Some people find melatonin can be helpful, but I'm not a prescriber, so I can't give advice on that. I know that a lot. What I do know is that ADHD. There are two neurotransmitters that are involved in ADHD in our brains. One is dopamine and one is norepinephrine. And norepinephrine actually really does operate in areas of the brain that have to do with the sleep-wake cycle. So a lot of people with ADHD struggle with sleeping and sleeping well. Kate, where's the information about the adult group mentioned? Sorry, can anyone share a link? Yes, I will share those links for you one more time. Here we go. Okay, here is the adult group that's starting next Thursday. Susan, tried mindfulness class before COVID. I just felt very frustrated and a failure before I knew about I had ADHD. So yes, some mindfulness classes unfortunately can make you feel bad about yourself, because it's like, well, my mind is drifting. Is there anybody else's mind drifting? Your mind is going to drift. What I love about Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach is they say, your mind is like a puppy. It's going to wander. And what you want to do is just gently bring it back. Not yell at yourself, why are you wandering, or you're a bad puppy, but just gently bring your mind back to what you were doing before, and treat it with compassion and kindness. Yep, my mind wanders. I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to come back to my breath, and my mind's going to wander again, and I'm going to come back to my breath. Jessica, washing the face with cold water helps, or cold water rinse in the shower helps regulate the nervous system. And I recently heard of holding ice cubes too. Whatever works for you. Jessica says, I teach my clients self-check. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you doing? What do you need? Wonderful. Elmarie Stokes says, my 6-year-old is extremely afraid to be alone, not even going to the bathroom alone, cannot leave a room, and leave him there. I'm wondering what what he's afraid of, and what are those scary voices saying to him that's going to happen when he is alone. Because one of the things about anxiety that we want to understand, particularly this type of anxiety, is that the anxiety is going to say blah, 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 and you can't handle it. So therefore, because you can't handle it, the worst is going to occur. And instead, what we want to do is to teach kids how to talk back to the worry monster. And so with a 6-year-old, I would definitely want to name the worry monster, draw the worry monster, and come up with some ways that you can put your arm around your son and take out your invisible sword and say, okay, Mr. Worry Monster, you can take a step back, because we've got this. We know what to say. We know what to do when this happens. That would be, I think, helpful because he's afraid of something bad happening. We want to understand what that bad thing is, and then we want to teach him how to manage it. As parents, what we often want to do is reassure our children that everything's going to be okay and they'll be okay. And that is a short-term solution, but it doesn't build any long-term skills. And it actually weakens their ability in the long term to soothe themselves. We want to change their relationship to the anxiety process rather than trying to solve each problem as it rears its head, because you're going to play whack-a-mole every day, all day if you do that. So we want to notice, when does the fear come up? What does the fear say? What is the goal of the fear? And how can we talk back to that fear? How can we say, you know what? I'm afraid to go to the bathroom by myself, but mom is on the other side of the door, so I'm going to try it. I'm going to hold on to my courage, and I'm going to try it and see what happens. Let's see. Danny. As an ADHD adult who was not diagnosed until later in life and now has an ADHD child, a lot of my anxiety comes from dealing with my son's school. I feel like I'm not only fighting for him, but for the child I was, who never got the supports I needed. It's hard not to get emotional when I'm constantly, having to push back against the school. Thank you, Danny, so much for sharing this. You know, as adults, we all have our invisible backpack of our school experiences, our family of origin experiences that we bring with us to parenting our children, and particularly to walking into their school. And so it makes sense to me that you get a lot of anxiety from dealing with your school, with your son's school, because you probably had issues in school where no one advocated for you in the way that you would have liked. You didn't feel understood in the way that would have been helpful. So I think, you know, Richard Schwartz has done such amazing work in his internal family systems books and workshops and trainings. And what he would say is that that part of you that's anxious is it's a part of you. It was a protector. It came out to protect you from various events in your childhood. But it may not be serving you anymore. It might be motivating you to do well for your own child, but it may not be serving you in the things that it's telling you about yourself. So what way can you work with that part? Maybe thank it for trying to help you and let it know that you've got this, or ask it some questions. What is it afraid of? What would what would it have liked someone to do for you that you can now do for your child? And in doing so for your child, you then are healing yourself. Hi, Michelle. My 10-year-old has always had massive anxiety about something happening to me. His general anxiety is high anyway. Either way, gets angry or runs off. So he's afraid. He loves you, and he's afraid that something could happen to you. And he doesn't know what he would do if that occurred. So what I would try to do is to come up with some kind of plan if something happens to me, or if I'm not feeling well. This is what we're going to do, and this is how you'll be taken care of. But I'm not planning to go anywhere anytime soon, and it's hard to trust that. So we're just going to have to take a chance and see what happens. And that's the hardest part about dealing with anxiety. Anxiety wants certainty. Anxiety wants security. And there isn't security and certainty in this world. There isn't. So we want to be able to have strategies to use in situations where we're feeling uncomfortable. Jennifer, her insomnia occurs both at bedtime and in the middle of the night, and then other times in the early morning. She's on Seroquel and melatonin. This affects her ability to get to first or even second period. She doesn't. Right. So, Jennifer, I would really encourage you to speak to your prescriber about this, because she may be taking too much of one thing and not enough of another, or she may be taking the medication too late at night, which is affecting her ability to get up. Yes, Charmaine. Jessica, then I teach the thoughts tracker. What is the trigger? What is the feeling? Name and feel it. What does this remind me of? What do you need right now? Self-regulation tools. What can I do differently next time I'm triggered to reprogram the brain? And I hope that this helps someone. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really lovely. I appreciate your doing that. It's very kind of you. Okay, let's see. Dana, is worrying about being on time or being on a time schedule general anxiety? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So there are different types of anxiety. There's, stranger anxiety with babies and separation anxiety. We'll see this with kids. For example, the person whose son won't go to the bathroom by himself. Then we'll see specific types of anxiety or what are called phobias. And those are like, I'm afraid of thunderstorms. I'm afraid of getting on a plane. Then we'll see social anxiety is a particular type of anxiety, general anxiety. And there are different types of things that are anxious related, but they're not, they're not diagnosed under the anxiety umbrella, such as perfectionism. And then there's OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is its own category but related to the anxiety. And then there's post-traumatic stress disorder, which is its own category but also related to anxiety. Okay. For social anxiety, an excellent workbook, the Shyness and Social Anxiety Workbook for Teens. Yes, that is an excellent resource. Thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe she doesn't feel as if she has choices for friends. Yeah, so that's an interesting response to something that came up earlier. That's true. Maybe she doesn't feel like she has choices, so she's choosing these people. And I'm curious what has happened to people with whom she was friendly at a different time before a diagnosis. And do you have family friends who have kids her age where you could socialize as families to help rekindle those relationships? Jessica, anxiety craves control, certainty, and comfort. So I learned this is why we feel anxious. Our subconscious mind wants to keep us safe and secure, and life to be predictable. So when it's not, this can trigger anxiety. Absolutely. Thank you for posting the ideas about sleep. Cheryl, how do you build executive functioning skills in kids? Organizational skills are severely lacking. Homework gets lost. Things get misplaced all the time. Any suggestions? Yes, I'm happy to talk about organizational skills and executive functioning skills in general. We touch on numerous of Facebook Lives, and there are many wonderful webinars in the Attitude Library that I would encourage you to check out. But essentially, building executive functioning skills takes time, patience, practice, and then time, patience, practice, repetition, direct instruction, and patience and time and practice. And I would encourage you when you're working on building executive functioning skills in your kids to pick one thing that you want to work on. Because what happens is, as parents, we see a lot of different areas that need improvement and growth, and we try to work on all of those. And that just creates anxiety for us and anxiety in our kids, and it doesn't perpetuate a sense of success, and we want them to feel a sense of success. Let's see. Okay, thank you. It's probably accept that these kids now gotten her in trouble with the law and have convinced her that street drugs will help better than anything else. Right. So that sounds really, really tough, Tammy. And kids are smart, and so and they're curious, and these kids are telling her that street drugs will help her. What about doing some information searches together? There's probably something on TikTok. I know there are some psychiatrists on TikTok who are giving good information about ADHD, whether it's Ned Hallowell or someone else. And maybe watch a couple of the videos in Attitude. Do some research, because actually street drugs do not help more than anything else, because they don't target the specific neurotransmitters that medication for ADHD targets. They just medicate the whole brain. They drug the brain, and that's different. Thank you. Helen. What do you do when you worry too much? What to Do When You Worry Too Much by Don Huber. Oh, it's a great book. Thank you so much for putting that up there. It is wonderful. Um, what are the best additions to an IEP for an ADHD child? I'm going to leave that to Annie. Thank you, Annie. Jessica, is procrastination a form of anxiety? I would say procrastination is definitely a type of, it's a manifestation of anxiety, but it's not like, it's not, if you go into the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, DSM, it doesn't say procrastination under anxiety. But so like it does, separation anxiety or social anxiety or, OCD. And so I think it's, but it is definitely related. And I think I've talked about this in some webinars before, but it is related. Oh, Maria, I'm so sorry. Ugh, what happened? Do you want to share? Can we support you in any way? Dana, if picking to focus on one executive functioning skill, how long a time would you take for it? Weeks, months, or a year? Well, my first response is as long as it takes, but my second response is try something for 3 months. Because we want to get into a new habit and a new routine. And then when there's progress on that, when that habit is happening more often than it's not, then you're ready for something else. There was an article this week in the Wall Street Journal about Adderall. Do you know why some clinicians are stopping it in patients? I think Adderall is a very complicated medication. It has a lot of side effects. It also is very addicting. And so I'm actually not, I mean, I know it helps people. I think that Vyvanse, which is the form of Adderall that is kind of cleaner delivery system, it can be a better choice for many people, but I can't answer that question. Hallowell just did a Facebook webinar through Attitude Mag about addiction in some ADHD people. Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so let me go back to, I have to scroll through something, so hold on a second. Okay, so I want to go back to what are some practical tools for helping kids learn how to manage their anxiety. So the first thing that we want to do is lower your anxiety. Manage your own concerns first. Kids have incredible radar, and they can pick up when their parents are stressed or anxious, and it increases their own distress, conscious or unconscious. And we know that where depression, there's a genetic component to depression. There's a predisposition. So if you are an anxious parent or you have an anxious family, there's a high likelihood that you yourself will be anxious. So the first step is we want to lower your own anxiety. Discuss your concerns with a partner or a friend or a counselor. Write these down and then strategize responses or to-do action items by creating what I call an anxiety decelerator plan. And so this will help you feel like you have a little bit more control because you have a strategy, you have something to do. So for example, if you're worried because your child isn't doing well in school and needs more academic support, your action on the plan would be to contact the school to set up a meeting. Here's the fear, what's the related action? The second thing that we want to do are help our kids identify their worries, okay? A lot of times kids feel like they are their worries. We feel like we are our worries, and we want to put distance between our worries and our perceptions of ourselves. So we can't help kids turn down the frequency or intensity of their anxiety unless we know what's causing it. And so worried thinking and environmental triggers can set off children and teens. So we want to kind of stop this and have a weekly or check-in as a family to talk about, what's uncomfortable or what's uncertain for them. Write these down. Pick one fear together that you would like to address. And when you're able to, when your child feels like he or she is able to regularly turn the volume down on that worry, then you can change to something else. But that's what we're trying to teach them, not to eradicate the anxiety, because it's not going to happen. It's how we're wired as humans. It has helped us survive. And yes, you may not live in a jungle with a tiger that's going to chase you, but what's happened is that our thoughts are now become tigers that are chasing us. And so we have to learn how to talk back to our thoughts and turn down the noise in our minds. We want to change the relationship to anxiety. So think like Sherlock Holmes and investigate anxiety like a puzzle. When, where, how does it show up? What are its triggers? When worry arrives, say to your kids, that seems like worry. What could you do to size it down? Many kids feel very powerless about anxiety and benefit from redefining it as something that's separate from who they are. Stay neutral and compassionate without fixing. This is a really hard one. Although you must intervene in situations of bullying, violence, or academic failure, or risky behaviors, most of the time your teen needs your support in thinking through responses to tricky situations, not solving them. So kids of anxious parents are more likely to be anxious themselves. So monitor and manage your own reactions, and then help your kids figure out what their alternatives are. Start small to build confidence. Anxiety is great at erasing memories of past successes, which is compounded for kids with ADHD and their working memory challenges. So choose a goal that's in reach and work on taking a small step first. What would your child or teen want to do if anxiety wasn't there? Help them recall a time when they took a risk and they succeeded. Then discuss those strategies with them and how those strategies of taking that risk can apply to their current situation. Offer them some language like, I'm willing to feel unsure. I can grab onto my courage and try this. Okay, we have some comments here. I'm an artist and I thought working for an art school would be perfect, but the boss, the boss was not an artist. My executive functioning skills, my executive functioning deficiencies were not acceptable for a type A boss that wouldn't give accommodations. That just really doesn't feel right to me. And I don't know if you can contact, if you live in the United States, but the Americans with Disabilities Act should provide you with some accommodations. I'm just saying, you have rights here. Michelle, as a soccer referee with ADD, I can't allow my mind to wander as a puppy and rein it back in. No, I'm talking about when you're meditating, not during the day, when you're meditating. I would have missed an entire play, foul balls, etc. As an MSW, I do believe meds have their place, used with caution, and only if they truly make a difference. Beyond reffing, I can let my mind wander, and that's where my creativity comes from. Great. I'm sorry if there was some misunderstanding. I was talking about when you're meditating to let the puppy wander and bring it back, not necessarily when you're coaching soccer. Jessica, yes, our thoughts are real and the stories and beliefs so real, but is it true? Mostly not. Also, I learned that 80% of our thoughts are negative. Is this true? Yes. Actually, I think it might be higher, but it's up there. Thank you. Michelle, while my daughter recently graduated from an art school, and you are correct that the admins are not artists. Artists are simply very special and unique people. Yes, who need support to deal with a lot of administrative stuff that's tough. So finally, I want to leave you with an idea, which is, can you help your kids opt for curiosity instead of anxiety? Can you help them say, I wonder about, rather than I'm worried about? Kids often feel a distinct lack of control in their lives, which fuels their anxiety, particularly those who are neurodivergent. So we want to try to shift away from how anxiety and worry are shutting kids down and predicting negative outcomes, and to the how curiosity can open them up and offer them possibilities. Focus on building resilience. Resilience is the antidote to anxiety. When your kids identify strengths and can know know people who care about them and can develop an interest, they feel more confident. So find ways to connect on things that matter to them, like a favorite computer game or a funny YouTube video, because nurturing your connection with them will improve their willingness to work with you in tackling their anxiety. So here's the free downloadable again on parenting neurodivergent teens with anxiety. Thank you so much for joining me today. Um, thank you, Lynn, for correcting that, and thank you, Jessica. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. And I want to wish those of you who are in the United States and celebrate Mother's Day on Sunday a wonderful Mother's Day, free of worries. Check your worries into the worry motel when you wake up in the morning. Write them down and let them, and then you can get back to them the next day. So thank you. I want to say I really want to just honor our mothers who are watching, and those of us who are mothers and daughters. I want to honor us as well, because if you aren't a mother, you certainly have one, and you've hopefully benefited and grown from that experience positively and maybe not so positively, but you've grown. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.